Hang on. The GPS turns faster than the boat can turn. I gotta line this up again.
And that's west. Very good. Thank you, sir. What channel are you going to be on?
Right now.
What we have here, this is a GPS system, laptop, and it actually logs our entire dive. Ritter, what we're here at the Verrazano Bridge right now, and the Navy requested us to give them some latitude and longitude numbers on some of the munitions that we found. So we dropped some buoys, and now what we're going to do is going to check out these buoys and see if they're on the actual munitions that we saw earlier. Once we get down there, my primary mission is to make sure that we have those markers on the munitions. I'm not going to bring any of the munitions up. It's very dangerous. They can explode. And the last thing is just come up safely and have a great day after that.
Good now? Yep.
diver and historian of the Underwater Historical Research Society was able to work with the cultural research divers to write the final chapter of Operation Shellfish. On March 6, 1954, crewmen aboard the USS Bennington, an Essex-class carrier, made an alarming discovery. A barge, which had been lashed to the hull of the ship the day before, was missing. The barge, however, was the least of the U.S. Navy's concern. Aboard the missing barge were 14,460 shells. Sailors scanned the waters of Gravesend Bay, New York, for the wayward barge and her stockpile of shells, but were quickly disheartened when they discovered that the barge and the ammunition were nowhere in sight. Over the course of the following days, the U.S. Navy located the remains of the barge near the Rockaway Breakwater near Rockaway Beach. The barge was bottom side up and had dumped her cargo at some point during her wanton escapade. Soon after, a phone rang at the U.S. Navy Salvage School located in Bayonne, New Jersey. The Navy divers, utilizing hard hat equipment, were called into action. The hardy divers of the deep were about to embark on what they quickly referred to as the biggest needle in the haystack job they had ever seen. Somewhere on the barge's voyage, the cargo of 14,000-plus shells had been lost in the murky water. 12 divers working from a yard float began descending into the waters in an effort to locate the munitions. The work was arduous, stressful, and completed under complete secrecy. The last thing the U.S. Navy wanted was a panic. The Navy was able to keep the loss of the ammunition and the subsequent diving operation from reporters for only a few days. The story leaked, and finally the search for the shells surfaced on the front page of the March 11, 1954 edition of the New York Times. The shells, based on initial information, were reported as harmless. Munitions experts noted that the shells were in a stripped state. On March 12, however, new information was obtained. The shells, 37 inches in length, 6 inches in diameter, and contained in a cylindrical metal container, were live. Though live, naval experts rebutted the level of danger to the public and stated that if someone were to find a shell, a series of safety measures would have to be circumvented to cause any type of danger. With the embarrassing loss featured in the newspapers, Navy officials skillfully weathered the public relations storm and remained confident in the ability of their expert Navy divers. With the loss now known to the general public, the U.S. Navy invited reporters to witness the diving operations in the waters of Gravesend Bay. On March 14th, the U.S. Navy reported that they were hopeful that they had located the cache of shells with the assistance of a sonar scope. Hopes were dashed, however, when divers went down and discovered the find, identified with the scope, was not the shells. The undersea hunt continued. Finally, in mid-December 1954, the U.S. Navy divers had located a part of the missing stash. 400 shells were recovered from the bottom by the happy lot of bottom scratchers. Once brought to the surface, the shells were transferred by a Navy tug to an ammunition depot in Earle, New Jersey. Though the Navy was pleased with the discovery, the mother lode remained elusive. Believing that they were finally in the right location, the U.S. Navy divers continued to trudge along the bottom in search for the next cache of ammunition. The work continued until December 18, 1954. With another day of inclement weather forecast for the next morning, the divers from the salvage school believed that they would finally get a break from the back-breaking and frustrating work. The delay in their search for the shells, however, would be quickly replaced with another physically and mentally challenging mission. For their next diving operation, they would not be looking for missing ammunition. A terrible tragedy would find them once again plunging into the murky waters, but not in Gravesend Bay. At 2:01 p.m. on December 18, 1954, as a thick fog blanketed the skies and rain pelted the runway, an Italian Airlines DC-6B, her four engines droning rhythmically, attempted to land on runway 4 of Idlewild Airport. The wheels of the lumbering craft did not make contact with the slick runway, and the captain pulled on the yoke. The aircraft lifted back into the sky and began to gain altitude to make another approach. Frustrated that he had been unable to make a successful landing, it was his fourth approach. He had run short on the runway. Misjudging his altitude due to the inclement weather conditions, the wing of the aircraft struck a guide light along the 2,000-foot-long pier jutting into the waters of Jamaica Bay. The DC-6 slammed it into the wooden pier, the aircraft quickly breaking apart, throwing passengers and crew into the icy waters of Jamaica Bay. The aircraft exploded, and a fire quickly enveloped the wreckage in the pier. Rescuers raced to the scene. Soon, despite the heavy fog and rain, helicopters from the Coast Guard and rescue boats from the New York Police and Fire Departments arrived on scene to help the survivors and fight the fire that sent thick black smoke into the gray fog. The scene of the tragedy was soon blanketed in the soft and repetitive glow of emergency lights. Sadly, neatly wrapped Christmas presents, cargo in the tail section of the aircraft began to drift ashore. only a handful of the plane's occupants had been found alive. The search continued into the night. Pulled from their ammunition operation, the U.S. Navy divers descended into the wreckage-filled waters the following day to search for the remains of the aircraft. In 50 feet of water, the divers discovered that the bottom was littered with aluminum. Working in 5 feet of silt, the divers began locating larger pieces of the wreckage, a wing, one of the engines, and finally the 3 sections of the aircraft's fuselage, and the missing crew and passengers. The difficult diving operation was completed in the first week of January 1955, and the divers, pivotal in their ability to retrieve the lost passengers, crew, and aircraft debris from the depths, resumed their search for the still missing shells. By January 14, 1955, another 44 of the shells had been recovered. The work appeared to be finally moving ahead with positive results. Operation Shellfish, the name issued to the salvage mission, however, suddenly disappeared from the pages of the New York newspapers. For all intents and purposes, the salvage operation had been completed with all the shells recovered, with the exception of only 10. But in an interesting twist, it would take over 50 years for news to surface that the U.S. Navy had not successfully located and retrieved all of the shells. In 1995, commercial diver Gene Ritter was exploring the underwater remains of Fort Lafayette when he made an interesting discovery, a single munition shell. In 2008, while again exploring the area, he and fellow divers located a wooden crate with 4 3-foot-long shells. 2 years later, in late October 2010, Ritter, along with members of the Cultural Research Divers Organization, returned to photograph the shells and conduct another search of the area. When Ritter descended to the bottom, however, he found much more than he had anticipated. Despite countless dives completed by the U.S. Navy, Ritter found himself surrounded by hundreds of shells. He had finally located the shells lost from the barge, and not just a few straggling shells. Over the course of the subsequent dives in the area, Ritter and his team were successful in locating approximately 2,000 shells. Working in conjunction with government and U.S. Navy officials, Ritter and his crew marked the locations of their discovery for the next dive operation planned by the Navy's EOD, or Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit. In early November of 2010, a crew of U.S. Navy divers descended into the depths in the shadows of the Verrazano Bridge. Though it is possible that the shells found are not from the USS Bennington, the types of shells located lead Ritter and his team believing that they are from the wayward barge. Once and for all, thanks to the discovery by Ritter and his team, the U.S. Navy was finally able to write the last chapter of Operation Shellfish, an underwater search and salvage mission that had started over 55 years ago.
Tell me about it.
Well, the current was pretty rough down there, but we found what we were looking for, and we dropped the marker buoys on some 20mm shells and some 50 caliber shells. They're all in a close proximity of about 5 feet from the buoy marker, so the Navy shouldn't have any problem retrieving those or finding those. So the visibility was pretty poor. I'd say about 4 feet. cold too. We're into the November month. But all in all, it was a successful dive.